Hanoi's first luxury hotel, it was reopened in March of this year, following extensive renovations. Vietnam Revisited continues in a few moments with an interview with Ricardo Peruan, general manager of Metropole Hotel. He'll give us a brief history of the Metropole and describe the challenges his company faced staffing a Western-style hotel in the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. But first, we continue our look inside the Metropole. The Romanized script, discovered by French missionary Alexander de Rhodes. Vietnam Revisited continues in a few moments with an interview with Jacqueline Pham, a C-SPAN employee who traveled with us on our recent trip to Vietnam. She was born in Vietnam but left the country at the age of 9. This is her first visit to Vietnam since 1975. But first, some examples of Vietnamese art. Vietnam Revisited continues with an interview with Jacqueline Pham, a C-SPAN employee who returned to Vietnam after leaving the country 17 years ago. She begins the discussion by describing her views of the difference between North and South Vietnam.
I've never been there. My impression of the place is it's prettier than the South. But it's a lot closer as a society. People are not as open as down here, and it's a much poorer place because it had been under communism for a longer time than the South has been. And as you can see, prominent in the streets as you were walking, people were always out in the streets selling things, selling cigarettes, selling lottery, selling, Coca-Cola. And people say there are more of that down up north than down south here. And because of that, because of socialism and communism up there, there is no economy, there's no trading with other nations, with the West, with France, with the U.S., with the Dutch, which used to be big in here with shell oil. And there's none of that in the north, and it's much poorer than down here. And you can see when you come down here, the city's bigger. You can see the advertising signs for Sony, all the Japanese firms, the Singapore, from Hong Kong, and that was, all those were here before 1975.
You lived in this house here for how long?
I lived in this house here as long as I can remember. I was born in 65, we left in 75, so for about 9 years.
Why did you leave?
I left because my parents left. I was too young to really make my own decision to where I want to live and where I want to go. My dad worked for the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is not too far from here, and that's how we got out of the country.
Were you afraid to come back?
No, I'm never afraid to come back. I didn't have a lot of expectations because I was afraid that I would be disappointed because I didn't know what to expect. So I had no expectations when I came back here of what it would be like, what the people would be like, what the government would be like, and the city and the people.
All right, a couple quick things. You moved from Saigon to the United States and went where?
Our first stop when we left, we lived in Indiana, and then we moved to Michigan.
Where in Indiana?
Terre Haute, Indiana.
Why did you move there?
We moved there because when we were in Arkansas, which is a camp, they put a lot of people there, you have to find a sponsor. And our sponsor was my dad's old boss from USAID, a man by the name of Barry Morton, who lives in Indiana, and he owns he has a farm out there, and he lives there, so he sponsored us and we went there.
Anyway, do you remember it being this noisy when you lived here?
Not this noisy, because it seems like there's a lot of traffic back and forth, not residential traffic, but business traffic, as you can see, people are going back and forth with produce and items.
Now, you moved to Indiana, and then you moved where?
To Michigan.
What year?
We moved to Michigan in 1978.
Why?
My parents just didn't like Indiana, and it was just, they didn't care for Indiana, so they moved.
And where did they move to?
They moved to Holland, Michigan, which is on Lake Michigan, on the lakeside, about 2.5 hours from Chicago, 45 minutes from Grand Rapids.
And where did you go to school?
I went to school, I went to high school in Holland, Michigan, and I went to college at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor.
Is it me, by the way, or has the volume just accelerated the last 10 minutes?
Exactly, and as you can see, look at all these business types who are riding past here.
Yeah, it's going to get noisier and noisier, I'm afraid. We might not be able to be heard. Don't we just wait until somebody passes? Your first impression when you got back here to your home?
My house. Well, my first impression is when I left, I was very small. I was about inches. And I remember everything was so much bigger, the street so much wider, the house so much bigger. And when I came back here a couple of days ago, everything is much smaller. I mean, this I remember used to be like, you know, a hill. I thought this is a hill. This is nothing. And I'm almost as big as my house now, so everything's much smaller.
Have brothers and sisters that lived here with you?
My parents had 5 kids, 3 girls and 2 boys.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to school about not too far from here, about a 5-minute walk from here.
Was it a safe place to live in?
Yeah.
Do you think it's a safe place to live now?
Safe depends on how careful your parents are. My parents and my aunts and uncles would never let us walk by ourselves at a certain time because there were a lot of kidnappings going on. So they wouldn't let us walk around by ourselves. I've never walked to school by myself. We always had our housekeeper walking us, or my mother would walk us to school, or we have somebody pick us up, but never on our own.
What was your dad's job with USAID?
He worked in the
USAID.
AID. He was in the education department. He translated all of the documents, and he He was a translator.
Would you hold off a minute? It may be advisable for us to move because it seems that we can't get this conversation more than half a second along, and then something comes along. Why don't we move to a quieter place so that we can... I think it's more disturbing for the audience than anybody else. Do you remember any of your neighbors when you used to live in this area?
I don't remember any of my neighbors.
Did you go back to your old house and see the people that live in there now?
I went back to my old house. There's a man who lives in there right now, and he said he knows my dad. I don't remember his name. He didn't write it down for me, but he says he knows my dad. And he's very nice. He invited us in. And unfortunately, he said he's out of town right now visiting his nephew who returned from Japan, so he's not able to be in there so we could go and film in the house.
You know, when your parents left, were they able to sell this house?
No. We left very quickly and very suddenly. We knew we were leaving, and my dad was at work, and he said there's always a person who's around with him to make sure that he didn't go around telling anybody that we were leaving because they didn't want anybody to know. USAID didn't want anybody to know that their employees were leaving the country. So the day we left, he came back to the house 3 hours before he left, and he says that we're leaving in 3 hours, so my parents packed within 3 hours. And my dad, I'm not sure, even had time to say goodbye to our relatives. And so we went to the airport, and we spent a night there and flew to the Philippines the next day.
We go back to talking about what it's like to be here. You know, there are Vietnamese faces everywhere you look. What does that feel like compared to seeing the different faces in the United States?
Well, it doesn't feel like it's my country anymore. I left so long ago, and I left when I was so young. I'm just a visitor here, a passerby. I really haven't had time to think what it's all like coming back here. But it's, you know, it's fine. I mean, I speak the language. I think they're very friendly people. They probably don't think I am the same way. But it's just like living anywhere.
Do you get any sense that you would be different if you lived here?
Definitely, I think so. I think a lot of people who went to the West and live in the West would not want to live here anymore. As in my mother's cousins, there are a lot of my mother's cousins who, after 1954, instead of going down south, they went to Paris, and when they came back, they did not think that they could live in Vietnam anymore.
What's it been like for you living in the United States? Do you feel at home?
Yeah, but I must say, I lived there for 17 years, and it's not the easiest place to live. For the first 10 years, it's a lot of turmoil. It's a lot of getting used to, your parents getting used to, because my parents are much older people. My dad is 67, and my mother's 12 years younger. And it's not easy for them to leave the country when my dad was 50 and my mother was 38.
How about citizenship in your family?
We're all U.S. citizens.
Is that hard?
No, you know, that's not hard. We were all under 18 when my parents became citizens, so automatically we became citizens.
Now, when you came back here, were you at all worried about, you know, I mean, I know we talked a little bit about this before you got here, but worried about getting back out?
Not at all. I have not heard anyone who came back and visit and had them detained. Anyone here, so no.
Would you recommend that others that may see this that have not come back?
Sure, I would recommend it because I think it's an interesting and important aspect of someone's life when you leave a country so dramatically in a war situation that it's good to come back and see what it's like, how it has changed. If they could deal with a 25-hour flight, I think that's the biggest problem.
How'd you deal with it?
Not very well.
Why? What's hard about it?
It's hard sitting still for 25 hours in an airplane, no leg room. You know, it's tough.
Go back to University of Michigan. You studied what?
I studied political science and communication.
Why did you want to do that?
I had always had an interest in TV. When I was young, I never liked TV. I went to school here, and all my brothers and sisters had classes in the morning.